Join us again in Athens. The initial exit polls are already in. It's 25 minutes after the polls closed. The exit polls have been very quick. They're based on around 80% of the votes cast so far, so they should be reasonably accurate within a margin of error of 2 or 3%. And what it suggests, as our pollster John Lewis was predicting, is just a very narrow lead for New Democracy, the right-of-centre Conservative Party, with what is estimated at between 27.5% and 30.5% of the votes cast. Syriza, the new rising left-of-centre alliance party that seems to have rather subjugated the role of the old PASOK ruling party, they have 27 to 30%, so just 0.5% behind predicted, and they really have polarised most of the votes so far. Well, John and Yanis still with me, and I'm now pleased to say I'm joined by Miranda Safa, who is an economic advisor to the government and a negotiator with the International Monetary Fund, and no doubt watching... Sorry,
no, I was affiliated with the IMF.
I'm sorry.
No longer affiliated with the IMF.
It's the sun in my eyes. I can't even read my script anymore, Miranda. Tell me, we're already starting to look forward to what's going to happen tomorrow morning. The world's markets will no doubt react to this. What do you think they'll make of it so far?
I think they'll be very jittery because it's neck and neck. And even though Mr. Tsipras, the radical left leader, has toned down his rhetoric lately, especially when he talks to foreign media, there is a risk that he might overplay his hand in negotiating with Greece's European partners and will get nowhere fast. So there will be a risk that he will lead Greece outside of the euro area.
Is that a reality, or is that just, I mean, there's certainly been lots of scare talk of that. I mean, other parties want to suggest that, I guess, to put voters off. Do you think it really is a reality of leading Greece out of the euro? Is that not feasible?
I don't think that he will do it deliberately, given that 85% of Greeks want to stay in the eurozone. But if he overplays his hand in negotiations, I am certain that European leaders will not disburse any more funds out of the second rescue package. They have said it in every possible tone, that Greece needs to implement the reforms if it wants to keep receiving financing. And Mr. Tsipras mistakenly believes that Europeans will be so concerned about contagion to Spain and elsewhere in the euro area that they will capitulate and continue funding Greece, even though Greece is not making much progress in the reforms.
What do you make of that, Yanis?
I have a different perspective. I think that there are now the Greek voters were facing two threats. One is the one that Miranda was talking about, the possibility that a Syriza government would overplay its hand, would be too pushy in renegotiating with Germany, and Germany will cut us loose. But there is the other risk too, and that is that we have a government by New Democracy which tries to implement unimplementable terms and conditions. The program that Greece is under, the Troika program, is completely off the tracks anyway. So it is perfectly possible to slip out of the euro while trying to implement it. So these are two impossibly hard options to assess. And it's damned if we do, damned if we don't. I think whoever is the prime minister, they will have to make a very important choice between petitioning the European Union for different terms and conditions and bargaining with them.
We're going to leave it there. We'll come back in a minute and talk more about this. And we're also hoping to go to Mexico and catch up with our economics editor, who's at the G20 summit at Los Cabos, which is about to start, with some big question marks for the leaders of the world to discuss there. More in a moment from Athens. Back to our guests, John, Yanis and Miranda here. Miranda, let's just get back to this point about the market reaction. What do you think the world wants to see happen here in Greece? What's the best proposition really for a new government if they can get it together in the next few days?
I think they want to see a strong government that will inevitably renegotiate the so-called memorandum with official creditors, And
the key thing is how they renegotiate, the tone of it, how the big countries in Europe react, I guess, the lenders. There needs to be a more grown-up discussion, doesn't there?
well, first of all, the economy is falling off a cliff right now. I think second quarter GDP will be a negative double-digit number, and so obviously the forecasts on which, the macro forecasts on which the fiscal adjustment program was built around are no longer valid. And the uncertainty generated by these elections has a big role to play in this. So obviously this has to be taken into account in redesigning the fiscal adjustment path. So most probably, instead of targeting a 4.5% primary surplus by 2014, this is not possible to materialize, and probably the target will be moved to 2015 or 2016, which means that someone has to put more money on the table.
Yanis, as an economist yourself, I mean, it strikes me that the deal that's been put down, the memorandum, is in a way like a fiscal corset around Greece. It's hardly able to breathe. How does an arrangement be reached between Europe, the Eurozone and Greece that allows Greece to start growing again? Because you can't grow your economy, you're never going to pay your debts.
That's indeed the case. The first point I want to make is that it is impossible for me to imagine a deal for Greece that would allow Greece to breathe, which would not also be implementable in Ireland, in Spain, in Italy. Don't forget that, speaking of the markets are far more interested in what Europe is going to do about Italy and Spain than they are about Greece. So they are looking at Greece in order to see what possible effect the election here will have on the powers that be in Germany, in Berlin, in Paris and so on, regarding how they will deal with the debacle in Italy and Spain. And I can't imagine that Greece is going to get a deal that leaves Ireland outside, that leaves Spain outside, that leaves Italy outside. So what we really need now is some circuit breaker that will end this madness, organized madness in Europe, where you have huge loans being unloaded onto weak states for the purposes of bailing themselves out and bailing the banks, and they all get entangled and sink very deeply into the bottom of a debt ocean. Something has to give in that mentality of Europe. Europe has to stop being in denial of the fact that this is a systemic crisis. So far, they're dealing with the Greek case as a Greek crisis, then with the Irish case as an Irish case. They don't have a systemic approach to a systemic problem. Now, hopefully, having watched the implosion, the economic implosion in Greece, which precipitated the political implosion, they will realize that the contagion is ante portas. It's approaching the Rhine.
Having said that, of course, in the case of Greece, the government has precipitated the recession by not paying its bills, for example, to suppliers or VAT refunds to exporters, and by taxing the private sector to death. This has deepened the recession and has made the fiscal adjustment process much more difficult. Instead, they should have cut spending from day one, which they are very reluctant to do.
Thank you very much, all of you. John and Yanis staying with me. I know Miranda's got to race off. Thank you very much for sparing the time to talk to us.